Just simply clamps on the front, and then when the flour is ground, it makes it easier to fall into the bowl. Wonder Junior hand-cranked grain mill. This is one of our most popular hand-cranked hand mills. Hi, welcome back. I'm Brian Johnson from OnlyGrainMills.com. Today, we're continuing our series of videos that help you choose which is the right grain mill for you. In our first two videos, we looked at the wide variety of grain mills that are on the market. We gave you a basic overview of each of those mills, and I've hopefully helped you narrow down whether you need an electric grain mill or a manual grain mill. So today, I'm going to compare those electric grain mills one against another. We've done a lot of testing at OnlyGrainMills.com, and these are definitely the best electric grain mills for their class. Each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses depending on what you're looking for in a grain mill. Now, keep in mind that no electric grain mill can grind oily grains like flaxseed or coffee, nor can they grind nut butters. If this is important to you, you need to look to our manual grain mills and the review videos we've done on those. Now, here are some of the ways that we're going to compare the mills today. I'm going to demonstrate to you how each mill operates. You're going to actually see the flour produced for the coarsest and the finest setting of each mill. We're going to kind of give you an idea of the speed that they grind and the noise level that you can expect. In addition, I'm going to give you an idea of how easy it is to clean each mill. I'm also going to give you a close-up look at the milling mechanisms of some of the units. I think this might be interesting for you. So let's take a look at the grain mills. We have the Wondermill, and we have the Family Grain Mill Hybrid System, and we have the Komo brand represented today by the Komo Classic model. Now, we've included the Family Grain Mill system in both our electric and our manual grain mill review videos because it has the unique ability to easily do both. As you've probably seen before, you can simply take the grinding attachment off the electric base, snap it onto the manual base that clamps to your table, and it operates much like any other manual mill on the market. For this reason, we thought it would be helpful to show you how the Family Grain Mill system in its electric configuration lines up against the other purely electric grain mills. So let's grab some grain and let's see which mill can grind the finest flour. Now, as we're grinding, pay attention to the noise level of each individual mill. This may help you see how noisy it's going to be in your kitchen. Pull under there and under there. And we will start our grinding test with the Wondermill. Now, for each test, we're going to use about a 1/4 cup of hard white wheat. We're going to simply measure that out. We take the top off the Wondermill. We're going to adjust it for its finest setting. This is what we're going to want to see what it can do. On the front, it has coarse bread or pastry flour. We've set it to pastry flour. And what it's going to do, it's going to grind that wheat. It's going to end up in its separate canister off to the side. Now, it's very important that with electric grain mills that you always turn the motor on prior to putting the wheat into the hopper. So we're going to do that. And we're going to put in a 1/4 cup of the wheat and let it grind. Kind of gives you an idea of the noise level. When it's done grinding, we'll simply turn that off. We'll let the motor spin down. We'll replace the lid on the hopper. And we'll take a look at what we have. And out of that 1/4 cup of hard white wheat, we have about that much flour. Now let's go ahead and do the same test in our Family Grain Mill Hybrid System. And we're going to take our grain, we're going to adjust it, make sure we're on the finest setting, turn on the motor and add our grain to the hopper. As you can tell, slightly different noise level than what you're going to get with the Wondermill. And it takes slightly longer than what the Wondermill did. You can always look inside of the hopper to see how much of the grain is still being ground. We got a little bit left of that 1/4 cup. Still got just a little bit more into the hopper. As you can tell, we still have flour coming out. The family grain mill system, with this more manual configuration, takes a little bit longer to grind the wheat than the purely electrics. There we go. As you can tell, we got a nice little bit of bread flour out of that. And we're going to do the same test now with our Komo. Again, we're using the Komo Classic model. Komo comes in many different configurations. We're going to put a 1/4 cup of wheat into our measuring cup. Remove the lid from our hopper. Now with the Komos, you simply grab a hold of the hopper and turn it based on the guide to the finest setting, since we want to do the finest flour that it will do. Again, you want to turn it on first, then we'll add our 1/4 cup of wheat. You can tell the noise difference between the Komo and either the family grain mill or the Wondermill. A little bit louder. But you'll also know that the noise level, even before I shut off the motor, is quite a bit less before you actually put the grain in. And that it did it quite a bit faster, especially than the family grain mill system. So as you can tell, we got about the same amount of flour. Now, let me just give it the field test. We'll start with the Wondermill. And now the family grain mill. Okay, definitely a little bit coarser. And finally the Komo. Okay, now we've done a lot of this type of testing, and we can tell you that my field test bears it out that the family grain mill, on a scale of 0 being the most coarse and 10 being the finest flour, family grain mill is going to give you about a 6 on the first pass. The Wondermill itself is going to give you somewhere between an 8 and a 9. And the Komo, probably as close to a 10 as you're going to get with any of the electric grain mills. It's a very nice flour. Now, with the family grain mill system, in its different type of configuration, it's not uncommon for it to need 2 passes, similar to what a manual grain mill would need. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this through one more time and see what kind of flour we can get if we run it through 2 passes. So we'll take another bowl. Again, we'll make sure we're set for the finest flour. We'll turn it on and add our first pass flour. We're going to knock it around so that it all falls into the hopper. Make sure we get it all. Now with the purely electric grain mills, you never want to run your flour through a second pass. Only because the family grain mill is a hybrid, using its more manual configuration is this acceptable. We'll let it continue to grind, and then we're going to test it to see if it got any finer than a 6. As you can tell, it takes just a little longer for that flour to go through the auger mechanism of the family grain mill system. And we're good. So after having run it through the second pass, it definitely got a little bit finer. Before it was a 6, I would say this ranks somewhere between a 7 and a 7.5. For those of you watching at home, I'm sure it's a little hard to get a tell just from our field test. So I'm going to try to give you a visual of the quality of the grinds. We're actually going to run it through a standard sifter duster, and we're going to put some flour in there. We're going to shake it for about 20 seconds into a bowl, and we're going to see what's left on this fine sifter mesh that's on the bottom. So we're going to start with the flour that we got from the Wondermill. We're going to take our bowl, and we're simply going to take that flour and put it into the sifter and do a standard sift. We're going to shake it out, and anything that's very coarse should end up on the top screen, that real fine mesh screen that's on the bottom of the shaker. We're going to give it about 20 seconds, and then we're going to remove it. And when we do, as you can tell, there's a little bit of the more coarse material that is left on that screen. So for each mill, we're going to put that in front. We're going to reset our sifters, and we'll do the next mill. So that was the Wondermill. We're going to do the family grain mill. Now remember, we took 2 passes for this flour on the family grain mill. We'll simply go ahead, I'll put a bowl under there to catch our excess, and we'll simply pour that flour into the sifter shaker. We will shake it around for about 15-20 seconds. Get it moving around on that fine mesh screen. Try to get all of the finer stuff to fall through into the bowl below so that we can get a visual on those more coarse grains that are left. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take that off, and you can see about that much is left. Again, we'll reset our sifter. We'll bring that bowl over, and we'll now run the flour that went through the Komo. Again, this was all made with a 1/4 cup, set to the finest setting of each mill, 2 passes through the family grain mill. We put it in our sifter for about 15-20 seconds, just making sure that we get all the fine stuff through that screen on the bottom, leaving just the coarser mesh. And let's go ahead and open that up. Okay, now you can see the difference. We'll put that right there. And as you can tell, this sort of bears out what we got from the field test. The Komo definitely made the finest flour. As you can tell, it only had a very little bit of the coarser material left, whereas the family grain mill system clearly had the most, which definitely bears out in the test. And then the Wondermill has just a little bit more than what we got out of the Komo. So hopefully that gives you a visual for those of you at home. So we've determined that it takes 2 passes through a family grain mill to get about a 7 on the fineness scale. And it takes a single pass through the Wondermill set to the pastry setting, and it's going to get you to about a 9, whereas a Komo on its finest setting is going to get you right there at a 10. So as you can see, you're giving up a little bit of fineness when you go with the flexibility of a hybrid grain mill system, but still, it's a very good quality bread flour. Also notice that the family grain mill was probably the quietest of the electrics due to its hybrid design. Next on the noise scale was probably the Wondermill, and then the Komo, when it actually had grain in the hopper, was probably the loudest. Now, let's do a similar test for coarseness. Now, you would use a coarser grind when you're trying to mill your grain into a heavier bread flour, or even coarser for cereals or grits. In our first test, we set our Wondermill on the pastry setting. Now, it does have a bread setting, and it also has the coarsest setting if you keep going on the dial. Now we're going to set it to that coarsest setting, and we're going to take another 1/4 cup of hard white wheat, and we're going to grind it to see the coarsest grind that we can get from our Wondermill. Again, we're going to use about a 1/4 cup of the same hard white wheat. Set to the coarsest setting. We're going to turn the motor on and then add our wheat. Doesn't take very long at all for the Wondermill to make flour out of that coarse grain. Let that motor spin down and we'll take a look at what we have. We'll put that in its bowl. So the coarseness of this flour is what you would call maybe a heavy bread flour. It's definitely much more fine than anything you would call cracked grains. I would say on our scale, it's probably somewhere around a 6. Probably about what you get out of one pass of the family grain mill system. So now let's look at the family grain mill and let's see if we can adjust it by turning the dial this way and see what kind of coarse grains that we can get out of it. We're going to take that all the way out. Now on its adjustment meter, it actually has the word stop when we move this dial out, and it'll tell us the coarsest that we should go, which is right there. We're going to measure out a 1/4 cup for white wheat. Turn the motor on and pour our grain into the hopper. As you can tell, it was much quicker with that because on its coarsest setting, the family grain mill will actually just crack the grain, sort of like what you would get if you're trying to do a cereal or some would do oatmeal. So the family grain mill system can go anywhere from a 0 all the way up to about a 6 or 7 if you're willing to go that second pass on a pastry setting. Now let's see what the Komo is capable of. Again, for the Komo, we simply grab the hopper and we turn it to the left over here on the coarseness scale, and we're going to set it for its coarsest grind. We'll go ahead and take a bowl, put it right under there. We'll get a 1/4 cup of grain. Now, the nice thing about the Komo is that they advertise that you can adjust the coarseness as you're grinding. So you can actually start it out and adjust it, which is a nice feature. We'll turn it on, pour the grain into the hopper. Very quickly, we get a grain that's very much like the family grain mill, which is just over cracked. So as far as the Komos, they can definitely do everything from a 0, which is barely cracking the wheat, to making a very, very fine pastry flour. So we can tell that if you're looking for that thing where you're just going to crack the wheat, if you're going to maybe make some grits or anything that takes that coarser grind, you're better off looking at the family grain mill system, or if you want a purely electric, the Komo. Now that we've made a mess of our kitchen, let's see if we've made a mess of our grain mills. Let's look at the Wondermill. So as you can see, there's always a little bit of residue that's left in the hopper. So you're just going to want to take a damp cloth and gently wipe that out. The next thing you're going to want to look at when we clean it is you're going to want to pop off your canister. Now you can either rinse that in the sink or wipe it out with your damp cloth. There's a little bit more. You can actually take the lid off where the canister attaches. You're going to want to run this under the sink, pop this little cup off and do the same for it. And when you do so, there's actually a little filter right here. It's a little air filter. You're going to make sure you take that out and you don't want to get it wet. It actually comes with an extra one when you buy it new. Now don't forget, there's this little hole right here where the canister connects to the grinding unit. That always has a little bit of flour in there, and if you take a wet cloth and kind of rub it in and out, you can get everything out of there. Now the one nice feature of the Wondermill is that it does have this separate canister. And you'll notice that the lid from the hopper will fit very nicely on top of the canister. Now they say you can use this by snapping it in place and then storing your flour inside your pantry. Now I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of that idea, and here's why. If I grind only one type of flour, then this is perfectly fine. But if you're going to grind different types of flour at different times, you don't really want your canister tied up storing your flour. So if you only use one kind of flour, that may be all right. If you're going to do multiple kinds of flour, either buy multiple canisters or just simply transfer it to your favorite device that you already have in your pantry. Either way, just simply wipe it out with a damp cloth and you're ready to go. So we'll go ahead and reset our Wondermill. Simply snap the top back on, twist your spout, and you're ready to grind. Now the family grain mill system is just about as easy. With this, you simply just take the hopper right off the top. You can run it under a faucet or take that damp cloth to it. The next step, if you're going to clean it, would be to simply unscrew this mechanism on the front. This is what actually holds the grinding wheels on. And you can see when I pull that off, a little bit of unground grain is going to get in there. And this is a good time for me to show you exactly how the family grain mill system grinds your wheat. As you can tell, it has a cone system that actually grinds the wheat. So that's the size of the burr that's actually doing all of your grinding. So you can take that out. It's stainless steel. You can simply wash it. And then, of course, pull out the plastic auger that actually moves the grain through the family grain mill system. So with this, it's actually a fairly easy cleanup, because once you have these parts off, you can take what's left, which is obviously just simply a plastic piece. You can wash off in your sink. When you're done, you simply return it to its base where it's easiest to work on. You replace your auger. You simply take your cone. It lines up. There's only one way it can fit in there. Again, only one way that it can fit on the front. You simply take your adjustment knob and slide it over the shaft, and then your retaining nut simply slides over that. It's actually a very easy process. And it makes sure that you got into all the innards and everything that the wheat touches can be cleaned. And again, you're ready to grind. Now, with the Komo, it's almost just as simple. You simply want to take the lid off, and if necessary, yeah, you might want to take a damp cloth just to the inside of the hopper. Now, if you want to do an in-depth cleaning, one of the things you can do is simply turn it towards its coarsest setting. You're going to go around about twice, and you're going to notice that that hopper just comes right off. Again, you can take a damp cloth to that. But one of the nifty things is you can see the grinding stones right there. If you like, you can wash them off. It's really not necessary. You could take a damp cloth to anything that's on the inside. This is not something you'd want to do a lot, but maybe every month or so. Now, when we put this back on, this is kind of nice to see, is this little suspension system that holds those two stones. This is actually what gives the Komo its system that allows it to grind everything from very fine pastry quality flours to just the cracked wheat. It's an ingenious little system, and we like it a lot. So once we put that back on there, we simply put our hopper back on, twist it clockwise. You'll hear it. We'll look for our black dot. It goes to the finest setting we know we're on. Replace our lid. Don't forget to take that damp cloth and get just this little bit that always hangs on the inside of the spout. Well, we've covered a lot of ground with our electric grain mills today, and hopefully seeing what each one is strong and weak at has helped you make your choice. So we hope this has been helpful. If you want an even more in-depth look at each of these mills, check out our brand-specific videos on our website. They go into a lot more detail on each individual model. Now, don't hesitate to send me an email if you have any questions about the mills you've seen. I answer all my emails personally, and I'd be happy to give you any assistance that I can. I enjoy doing these videos for you. I thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time at onlygrainmills.com.